Good morning, everybody in Europe. Good afternoon in China and wherever you are in Asia. Thanks for joining us today. Let me introduce myself. I'm Laure de Caragnon. I'm the founder of China Connect, a platform connecting Western marketers with a China digital ecosystem since 2011 in Paris and Shanghai, and helping them make a presence on the Chinese web and connect with the Chinese globally. So why did we start? Why did we launch actually China Connect ReStart Live? Well, China and APAC became the #1 worldwide economic region in 2020. That was actually the theme and the objective as well of the 10th edition of China Connect in Paris. And in parallel, China was the first country by the Covid-19, but is the first to recover. So, all in all, we felt like it was all the more necessary to share what experts on the ground can tell us of their experiences and plans for the future, and which we believe can be extremely inspiring and useful for all of us, as much for APAC strategies as for potential adaptations to the West. So today's topic, in fact, is also a great continuation for those of you who have attended last week's seminar, which was dedicated to healthcare. We're in full spring and we want to go out and exercise, practice sports. So we wanted to share about the sports and wearable retail markets. So before we start, I just want to first share some guidelines. You can ask questions along the way in the Q&A tab just below your screen. And Annie Nanette, who is working with us also as our tech support, will be in the chat room and will manage all our conversations in case you need. So now, let me introduce our two guests of the day. First, Sharmin photographer. Sharmin, I'm very happy to have you back. Actually, you were among us last year at China Connect in Paris. So Sharmin is the head of Asia of SUUNTO, a leading brand in the Amer Sports portfolio. Amer Sports, which is a recognized worldwide company, including brands like Solomon or Wilson if you're a tennis player. And Sharmin has grown in China, Southeast Asia, and in the Indian subcontinent, and spanning her tenure for more than 13 years. So she has a deep understanding of everything that relates to e-commerce platforms, omnichannels, distributor and sales management fundamentals in APAC. Before that, actually, she's been working in luxury groups, Richemont, LVMH, as well as L'Oreal when it comes to cosmetics and skincare. So welcome, Sharmin.
Thank you very much, Laure.
Good afternoon as well, Robin. So Robin TREBBE is managing China and APAC, and in his role actually is responsible for developing INTERSPORT in the whole region, currently operating in Greater China, including Taiwan, the Philippines, Indonesia, Australia, and New Zealand. So before he worked as a global retail director at INTERSPORT, and he started his career in different roles at Karstadt, the German sporting goods and department store company. Welcome.
Thank you, and also hello to everybody.
So let's start actually to address in a nutshell the context of our discussion today. First, the impact of the coronavirus on the economy, with you, Robin.
So thanks, Laura, and again, welcome from my side. So when looking at the impact of COVID, I think it's quite early in the stage that we have results on sales. So that's why I find this here, the impact on the stock market, quite interesting here from January 1st to March 31st. And there's no big surprise that you see on the left side, aerospace, travel companies are hit the hardest with more than 40% or around 40% hit from January 1st to, on the right side, pharmaceuticals, consumer services are least impacted. We talk today about sporting goods, which is partly fashion and luxury, but also apparel. And this industry is down 25% roughly on the stock market. And this is a very good indicator how the business developed in the last months. Again, it's unfortunately a bit too early to have impact on sales. I think everybody of us has impact on sales. and a very few of us positively. But on the stock market, you see that. And I will come to specifically the stock market and the sporting good industry later. Can we see the next slide, please? So what is interesting here, and now coming already to a more APAC view, is that the consumer optimism came back. So just recently there was this research. We see that only 5% of the people in China are pessimistic and think that COVID has a long-term, long-lasting impact on the economy. As well, interesting here is that almost 50% are optimistic, and this is kind of similar in India and Indonesia. I think it's different why this is. China is quite late already. I don't say it's corona-free, but it's in a later stage already. Recovering now and opening again now. All our stores, I will come to this, are open again. India, Indonesia are more on an early stage there, but still the optimism is much bigger than the pessimism. And then we have the more mature Asian countries, South Korea and especially Japan, where we see a much more pessimistic view. Not really because they are worse in the situation of COVID, but I think it's also an impact of the general economic situation with less growth in the last years. So, but quite an interesting view on the consumer perspective already. And again, China quite positive, I would say, and I will come to China sales recovery later. Can we go to the next slide? And this reflects also in the media consumption, which is a good indicator now, and I think everybody of us is looking at that as well at the moment. We all hear numbers about media consumption, and specifically in China, and I'm based in China, I'm living in Shanghai. In China, the TV consumption increased from 1.5 to 7.5 hours per day during the lockdown. Of course, there was not so much to do. You didn't have to work, you couldn't go out. That's why media consumption increased a lot. Also social media from roughly 2 hours to 5 hours per day. But why this is interesting is, of course, there's also chances in there. We will all go to this later on with how to connect with consumers more and more intense, how to increase brand loyalty, how to use live streaming and new forms of sales or just connection to consumer build-up. This is quite interesting. And then when we go to this, we don't have to go through all these numbers. But what is interesting as well here, China, the media consumption will not grow in the next weeks. No surprise. Everybody is kind of back to work. But then India, Indonesia, South Korea, a lot of still increase of the media consumption. And I think we all have to think about what can we do. I will get back to this point also later. So that is it for me. For now, I will get back to Laura now.
Thanks, Robin. Yes, definitely. So, Sharmin, before actually we dig into the specifics of the COVID-19 impact across Asian territories, can you please screen the APAC e-retail platforms, actually give us just the big picture?
Sure. So let's have the next slide. Good afternoon, good morning, everybody, and it's good to be back on China Connect. So as Robin was talking more about the situation that has now come upon us uninvited, let's take a quick look at what the Asian giants reality is for us and what we can optimize, what the landscape is, and we talk about the optimization in the following slides. So we have homegrown Asian platforms, as you can see. We're very proud of them. Top 8 now in our region with more than 1.8 billion active users. Of course, Alibaba Group, as usual, leads the pack. Not to mention, there's Lazada and To as part of the ASEAN bloc as well. And then JD in China. So China essentially is more than 1 billion consumers who are active online. But then we also have some big forces to reckon with, like Amazon and Rakuten, which have existence and active business in Japan, in India, in Australia. Rakuten is a giant with 111 million active users. And then we have some local ones which are really big in local environment. Indonesia has Tokopedia, which are with a whopping 90 million consumers who are actively using the platform. And then we have Naver in Korea, which is one of the largest and the oldest, started in 1997. But as you can see that on one side you have this massive landscape, but look at the top right side of the slide where, Anina, if you can point over there. So it's very clear what has happened over the last 3 months. The dark blue bar, as you can see, is what consumers used to purchase traditionally on the platform. So lifestyle products, premium products, consumer electronics. This is apparel, soft goods. This is what consumers actively purchase. And you can see that the curve is quite steady. And then the yellow one that you see was what consumers used to use the platform for buying essentials in the past. Okay, and now with the COVID reality, you can see the spikes, that there is a new category involved, or rather you can just, it's not a new category, but it's new essentials. And it just tells you that ever since the lockdowns have started from China to the rest of Asia, you can see that there's an essentials products boom, and I'll talk about it in a few slides down the line. So that's kind of a snapshot. Let's go to the next slide. Now, if you look over here, because I come from SUUNTO, which is from the wearable industry, I thought it would be interesting to show that in the Asian context, in addition to the big platforms, we also have a massive wearable space. And as you can see on the right-hand side of the slide, the size of the number is how big the wearable industry is, in which the sports wearable also plays an active role. So a massive industry that we need to support. With COVID coming in now, what we need to do is leverage the platforms and get creative to manage and plow through the COVID attack, which is what I'm going to speak about during the duration of the call today. Back to you, Laura.
Yeah, thanks very much, Sharmin. Yes, Robin, can you tell us about, how the sports market weigh in China and Asia versus the rest of the world? I believe you have one or two figures about that.
Yes. Yeah, if we go to the next slide, Anina. So obviously, this is the view on the last year without COVID. But talking about the whole sports industry in Asia, we have China as the biggest market in Asia. It's already the second biggest sports market in the world, and will overtake the USA, which is now the biggest one, over the next 2-3 years. And you see this growth rate, which is of course much bigger in the Western world. And when this growth rate continues in the next 2-3 years, China will overtake. And now with COVID and the different impacts, it might be even faster. Then the second and third, Japan and South Korea, again, what I said before, the more mature markets not growing so much. There's 2-3% growth in the last year. I believe no growth maybe next or this year. But then there's some other interesting markets like India, Indonesia, Philippines is not even on that chart here now, Thailand, Malaysia. And if we go on the next slide, please. We see that on the next slide, there's a ranking of the global sports there. So on the left side, you see the ranking in the whole world. So we see that China is the second biggest sport market in the world, Japan the third biggest, South Korea the seventh biggest, with not a big population, and then India. India, of course, is a very interesting one. Where it's already the 9th biggest sports market, even though the spending per capita is quite low. I mean, South Korea has 50 million people, India has 1.3 billion people, but the sport market is roughly the same size. So that's quite interesting. 0.7% of the population in Korea have at the moment the same sports spendings and 18% of the global population in India. Imagine they spend more on sports in India. And the same goes for China. If we see the spendings per capita in China, we are by far not where they are in Europe, in USA, in Japan. So these markets will grow over the next years, and APAC, Asia, is definitely the place to be for sports. Also, I mean, now this year Tokyo is Olympics is suspended, but if this will happen next year, and then all the big sport events from 2018, the Winter Olympics in Korea, 2020 Tokyo, or 2021 Tokyo Olympics, 2022 Winter Olympics in China. All the big sport events, the biggest ones in the world, are happening in Asia, actually. So this is definitely one of the signs also, and we all know that Asia is the place to be for sports players as well. Sports going everywhere, but especially in Asia Pacific. So this was a rough overview about the markets here in APAC. So I would hand over back to Laura now.
Very, very nice shot at that. Very interesting. Next with you, Sharmin. Actually, we figured out those past weeks how much sports moved and shifted online, with people downloading a lot of apps. So I guess you got a few very interesting information regarding sports apps, I believe, and where in the wearable markets, where you're into with SUUNTO watch brand, where is the market heading when it comes to wearables? Your turn.
All right, so to the next slide. All right, so most of you are actually subconsciously using apps and maybe not really cognizant of the fact that a lot of the sports industry, where Robin plays, as well as in the watch sports device industry where I play, apps has become a very, very integral part of the ecosystem that is now evolving in the world today. And as you can see, I've listed on the screen the top apps that we have, that we track in China and in rest of Asia, and also in big countries like Germany, Americas, and the Northern European bloc as well. So what I can show you here is that overall, in the entire sport app base, 350 million consumers come from China alone. That's a massive, whopping number that exists in China for leveraging sports apps. And now in today's world and age with COVID-19 situation, how we can leverage these apps will become even more powerful and interesting. And I'll talk about that during the strategy sharing and some ideation. But it's important to remember that sports apps are here to stay. Every app actually here in the market. So all of you as users on your mobile phones, on an average, you use about 20 to 30 apps in your daily life. And sports apps have become a very big part, and wellness and fitness apps have become a very big part of that. If we go to the next slide. Well, okay, so there was a click there, sorry. So that's what I was trying to say, that there are 4 big apps we're tracking. And now we switch to the wearables market forecast. Now, before we jump into strategy, it's important to understand where the wearable market is actually trending towards in the device, in the hand wrist device category. On the left-hand side, you see that it's in units, in million units. So in 2019, we clocked in 117 million units globally, out of which the Asian share is approximately between 25 to 30%. And on the right-hand side, you see that in value, in 2019, this was a $20 billion industry or category, as it were. And as you can see that we split this category into 4 different types. The biggest ones are the smartwatches. So for all of you who want to know what falls into a smartwatch today, it's the Apples, the Samsung, Huawei's of the world. And then you have the activity trackers and fitness bands, where you can we can use an illustration of Fitbit for example. And then you have the sports watch category, which is SUUNTO, Garmin, Polar, which fall into the hardcore professional sports category. And what I would like to point to you is, as we are climbing this journey, the lines are blurring. And on the right-hand side, the evolution is that more and more consumers are looking for smart products. And so when we go into the online context, this smart word is going to play very heavily into our strategy, because The app is a smart situation. The device has become smarter, and e-tail shopping is going to take a big chunk of this business by the nature of what it is existing. So we'll talk about more of that down the line. Over to you.
Thanks very much, Sharmin. Well, now time now to figure out, how sales have been impacted in China, beyond in Asia for the sports market and INTERSPORT. What's the situation now, Robin, precisely?
Yeah, I can point out, as I said, it's quite early in the stage of recovery, but if we go to the next slide, I can explain that a bit. Again, I promised you at the beginning I would go back to share price, and especially on sporting goods companies. You see on the left side a list of 30 of the biggest sporting goods companies as a retailers or brands, and the deviation in the share price it's not sales, it's share price deviation there. And then what is very interesting, if you go to the right side, you see the different regions and you see brands and retailers. So the red, I don't see that now. The red, for example, in Europe, the average share price went down 39% over the last 3 months. And interesting, 55% is sport retailers, and brands, it's only 27%. Sorry, there's no legend below. It used to be in there. And then when it comes to America, a little bit better, but still the same picture. Sport retailers minus 48%, so almost half of the value lost. Sport brands only 27%. And interesting, China, again here on the way to recover. Retailers own only, let's say, minus 36%, and brands also 27%. So it's interesting that retailers suffer more from the crisis than brands. It's not really surprising. I mean, retailers are closed, brands are stronger in e-commerce and have a certain brand equity also for afterwards. So the retailers suffer more, and by region, Europe currently is suffering most. It might be different in a couple of weeks when America is maybe the situation worse than in Europe in COVID. But very interesting that China is much better there in terms of value loss in the last months there. And if we go to the next slide, then I can share some sales recovery in especially China. We are operating. Can we go to the next slide? So what we've seen here, not easy to understand on the first view, but we had a sales peak, Chinese New Year. I think everybody knows that Chinese New Year is a very good sales peak in China. We had a very good January here in China, and then when the lockdown started, and all our stores, but not only ours, but also all the other retail stores except food industry, were closed on the 25th of January. So then sales dropped dramatically. Only online sales, and even on a very low level, stayed. And then we had a lockdown until the 10th of March. So we opened our stores, and we were allowed to open the stores again on the 10th of March. And after that, the sales are recovering. And now we are in middle of April. We are roughly at 70%. And this is industry, I would say. I cannot talk for the whole industry, of course. But from my information, roughly we are back at 70% in China. And this is, of course, what everybody is really interested to see. How fast is the recovery in sales? Will there be a recovery to 100%, or will there even be a rebound of sales? And we expect that there will be a rebound after June, when we are back at 100%, hopefully here. That then even there will be there's a big sales promotion again in June, the 6/18, and that in this month higher than the previous year. But when we go to the next slide, we pointed out some facts there. So during the lockdown, offline sales obviously dropped to 0 or almost 0, at least in our industry. Online sales continued on a low level. So I heard some numbers that also the big players lost 80-90% of sales also online. Some others say differently, and that hopefully you lost less. But I think in average you can say that. But what is really positive, after the lockdown was done, and only a few cases of COVID we recovered per week by 12 to 16%. And again, this is really industry average. So I think this is quite a positive sign. And what we also see is that stores in smaller cities and less busy areas, maybe not the main malls somewhere downtown in the cities, but more the smaller cities or street stores recover faster. Of course, people still avoid to go to too crowded places. The conversion rate increased a lot. Online also, but I talk more about offline, because people really have the intention of going shopping to buy something. They don't go window shopping. I mean, why should you do that at the moment? You try to avoid still crowded places. So if you go somewhere, then you buy also. Then the sports style categories, or more the fashion part, was hit more than performance categories. So people still bought maybe I will come to that, their real sport performance products, but on the sport lifestyle, I mean, where it's more about going out and looking good, this category was hit more than the performance. And then again, the numbers, what I mentioned before. So in April, 3 months after the outbreak and 1 month after the opening, but also the industry, most of them are roughly at 70%, 60-70% of sales. That's not too bad. And we estimate that the full recovery is in June. So I would say not too bad. And when you go one slide further, online, of course, is a different picture, and it's not really easy to get to reliable figures there. There were some reports, and of course, some companies publish their numbers. I have seen numbers, and again, I don't say it's 100% right, but Alibaba still reported the growth in Q1 of 2020 of 3%, JD even a 17% growth. Of course, that was heavily driven also by food and food delivery and whatever was also sold there. So online, of course, is a big winner of that whole crisis. But what we also see is that social media and communication-focused platforms like WeChat with all the mini programs, or Douyin, TikTok with all the interactive stuff and the social commerce, social recommendations, they gained a lot of traffic, but also sales via these platforms gained a lot. So this was definitely a chance really to catch up with some of the sales, what you lost maybe in offline or in the traditional online business, on some of these platforms. So it's not easy yet, because it's quite early in April still to get reliable data from smaller platforms and websites. I think this gives a good overview what happened here and how fast the recovery is. What everybody, of course, in the whole world wants to know: how fast do we get back to normal business? So thanks for that, and back to Laura.
Thanks, Robin. Thanks very much. Sharmin, what about the wearable markets? Let's jump into a bit. We're a little bit late on schedule, so that we keep everybody till the end. So let's have a look, yes, to the wearable markets figures, and then before we'll see, how much Asian platforms responded actually to the situation. Go ahead.
Okay. All right, so let's go to the next slide. As what Robin was alluding to, unfortunately, our situation in the wearable footprint and category globally is not looking very promising. As you can see, in 2019, this industry grew and this category grew by 89%. That's virtually doubling the business. That's the nature of our business. When you do it right, it just booms. But the reality is that with the COVID situation, the prediction is that 2020 will not grow more than 9.4%, which is a tremendous blow to the entire wearable category. And not just that, but the fact remains that the spare parts which are used to make most of the products for us, whether it's smart devices or whether it's mobile phones or it's headsets, majority of that comes from China and Asia. And as a result of which the supply chain has drastically impacted the business for us. Our wearable sports device category is actually projected to degrow by -13% in 2020. So we are still going to have some serious headwinds to deal with. And that's why it becomes even more critical how we spend our money, how we invest, despite knowing that it's going to be a year which is not going to bring in, let's say, the bowl of rice, as we say in China. And it's going to be a very, very tough 2020. The only recovery we expect is from H2, and even that, it is not going to help to resurrect the year the way we had anticipated. Let's go to the
let's get to have a look at our Asian platforms respond to the context.
So now that we see how we are reacting, how the situation is, it's as Robin had alluded to the fact that China has recovered faster, whereas the rest of Asia is still very much in lockdown period. And I want to show you some trends. It's very important to understand that if we are going to do online business as our savior go-to channel in the next 9 to 10 months, we need to understand how the animal is behaving right now. So if you see the lockdown in our part of the world, which is ASEAN, Australia, Japan, Korea, it started much after China was in lockdown. In fact, Japan was just 10 days ago, literally. And you can see that this is an example we took from Lazada, where it shows you how dramatically in the wearables smart industry, the traffic has just crashed. The traffic has declined overall by close to 35%. The trend continues to show a bleak line, and the entire consumer electronic category needs to keep an eye out for what we need to do to arrest ourselves. Whilst this is happening, it's also important for the rest of us to understand what is happening on the e-tail platform. So let's go to the next slide, please. Here I've shown you a Lazada illustration. It's common knowledge, and you saw it in the first slide that I showed you, where the essentials category is now booming. So obviously the platforms have moved their attention to what a consumer is actually asking for at this point in time, whether it's masks or it's sanitizers, it's food products, and really appealing to the consumer to go and buy essentials. And the amazing reality is that people who've never shopped online have now started because there is no choice. And in the process, what COVID-19 is creating for us is actually it's a subconscious situation, but we are going to change the face of e-com in the next 12 months, and I can see it happening already. Let's take one more example in the next slide, where I want to show that not every platform, oh no, sorry, there's one more here. So here I want to show you, I have been working in ASEAN since the last 13 years with distributors in Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, India, you name it, we've had customers there. And the offline dealers have not been able to jump onto the online bandwagon fast enough. And what I'm really proud to say that a platform like Lazada, with whom we work very, very closely, is now bringing in these SMEs, these small and medium-sized entities, inviting them to come and sell online, encouraging them to come into the forefront where consumers can avail their products on an online basis without charging them. And I don't know if you know, but in the online business, the platform is pretty expensive to do business with. And I think that this is groundbreaking when online and offline meet for the common good of a consumer. You can rest assured that in future, more and more of these partnerships are bound to flourish. And this is a great, I mean, despite the toughness we're going through, I'm super positive about what's going to happen in the future between the online and offline, because that's where we need to keep our eye, since the year is pretty much gone in a broad picture. And then let's go to the Amazon example. I wanted to show that not every platform is selling essentials, but this is the time where platform has you captive as an audience in the house. And because you are captured in your house and you have nowhere else to go, the platform gets a chance to experiment and test out all sorts of products that you may never have really focused to purchase. For example, on the Japanese side, we saw that they're selling a lot of home interior stuff, which you may not buy immediately, but you're going to start kind of chewing on it. And then the bottom right is an Australian example where they are appealing to your home entertainment, watching movies at home, buying tech products which are related to home entertainment. I mean, the floor is yours. The floor is the platforms, and what we sell and what we show on the platform. This is the time where consumers are actually having the time to get to know us as brands, as products. So I would say make use of this time. If you have the money, make use of this time. Next slide, please.
Well, actually, thanks very much, Sharmin. And on your side, Robin, at INTERSPORT, what were the main beneficiaries actually of the situation, and what kind of opportunities have been leveraged in China?
Yeah, so I would not say only INTERSPORT. I would say more for the sporting goods industry. If we look at the next slide, there are some major trends affecting the sporting goods, some major impacts. And obviously, one of the biggest or the biggest might be the shift from offline to online. I'm also convinced, as Sharmin said before, it's not a short term, but it's a long term thing. I mean, my parents don't really shop online, but they learned how to shop online because they have to now, and they find it quite convenient. And they said, okay, we might go back, we might not go back, because we find it very convenient. So there will be a lot of new business ideas also, delivery services, and so on. So then what we've seen, luckily, some categories, for example, gym equipment, won a lot. That's also quite obvious because people want to do sport. And what can they do at home? They can do cardio with spikes, with treadmills. They can use weights, elastic bands, whatever, or wearable. I mean, people even run a marathon in their kitchen or in their. I think we all have read that story. There was a Chinese guy, but now also more and more people do that, running a marathon, a full course marathon on their balcony, and then buying a new wearable for that maybe. Then virtual training classes. I will come back to this point also later, but this is booming via apps, as Sharmin said before, but also via normal tools like Zoom and Facebook, Instagram, whatever tools are used. This is really a booming thing. And also this, I think, will stay as the same because people will find out, okay, I can do most of my classes even at home, yoga classes. Of course, I'm missing this social component, but I can save a lot of time because I don't need to go to the gym or to the yoga studio. So I can do that at home. And then I'm home and can have a shower and then go to work or something. Then what we see is the approved outdoor exercising, so walking, running, cycling is still allowed in most of the countries. This is also still relatively good in terms of sales and participation. And people do new activities because of that. But on the other side, there is an overall reduction in spending. So in one study, there was something 72% of consumers want to spend less, and especially on the apparel and team sports business. We'll come to that. Also suspended sport events, both amateur and professional levels. Everything in the first half year in China is suspended. Big events even longer. Nobody knows when the big football leagues are starting again. So Australian football leagues, everything is suspended at the moment. And this is a big impact on the sporting goods industry as well, of course. The European Championships, Olympics, all postponed to next year, and the smaller events and the events which come every year, like even Wimbledon, are cancelled now. So, but even sporting good players, I mean, not sporting good brands, but players have a lot of losses. So a lot of marketing losses, but also on apparel, on merchandising. So also these people lose a lot of, and depending on their contract, they don't even get their money. And of course, what is happening is cancellation or postponement in new product releases. This is happening now, but for the good of the industry. A lot of products are postponed now 1 or 2 seasons, luckily. I mean, of course, the warehouses are full. I will get back to that later. But there will be products launched later because it doesn't make sense to launch a lot of products now. So there's some major trends. And if we go to the next slide. So what we see, I said that at the beginning, and the last is the first point, the online shift. So we have seen already in the last year, online was in China 36% of on the bottom left. You see that it's steadily growing in the last year. So online is in sporting goods in China already 36% now in 2019, and it is the biggest channel already here, stronger than malls or department stores, street level stores, factory outlet stores. So with 36%, and this we see this will grow. Due to COVID-19, nobody really knows how much that will be. Will it even be 50-50 in this year already, which was supposed to happen only in 2, 3, 4 years? In some industries, of course, is already online dominating, but traditional sporting goods, people still like to go to stores, test them, see them, try them. But this is changing now. And again, not sure if it will be 40%, 45%, or even 50% this year, but there will be definitely a shift this year, and probably then also a long-term shift in where people buy products. So, thanks, Laura, and back to Laura.
Well, I think you're going to go and keep on, on this trend, Robin. I think you have actually a plan. How, brands, what should they embrace, for the recovery period? I think you've got a plans with 4 actions. So go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you. So then, if we go to the next slide, there was a good process and a good graphic which I kind of stole. If we go to the slide. With the 7 steps during COVID. Okay, now we are coming. So I quite like this chart because it's very visible. So where are the countries? And some countries might say themselves they're a little bit earlier or later in the stage in where they are now here. But I think in general we see China is now coming out of the storm, maybe South Korea, Hong Kong as well, even though there was a second wave now, also Singapore. Australia handled it quite well. I hope a lot of European countries are now on the peak or going down now. And then what actions to take? There's seven major points in there, and I will go in detail in 3 or 4 of them. But of course, the obvious first thing what you have to do is, and what we have to do, but everybody in the whole business world, let's say, is cost and liquidity management. Everybody, of course, has to first make sure that they can pay staff costs, their whatever invoices they have. So this is, of course, the first thing. But then also managing stock and collections. What can you do? What can you postpone? Can you cancel some products? Can you launch products later? There's a lot of things what you can do. And again, just about the second point, supply chain, we could talk for hours here, but there's a lot of smaller and bigger things what people can do. And then the third thing, leveraging e-commerce and increase the digital marketing. We talked about that. We will talk about that in a while. This is one of the key things really to get through the crisis and to get ready. There was this very interesting and funny one. Who is the driver of your digital transformation? Is it A, the CEO, B, the CTO, or is it COVID-19? So it's, of course, a bit sarcastic, but I think it's in general true. So I talked with a lot of people in our industry, but also in other industries, who said this COVID thing brought us digitally 5 years ahead. So we always planned to be more digital, but nobody really did it. And this is really now a push. Everybody has to understand now we have to do more online, we have to do more e-commerce, we have to do more digital marketing. So this is really key. Then fourth thing, capitalizing on home digital sport trends. I will come back to that in a second. And then when you're coming out of the storm, as China did now, what do we do for reopening? And that's valid for physical and digital. How do you reconnect to your consumers that they come to the store? How do you make them feel welcome? And from small things to cleaning the door regularly with disinfection thing, that the people think you take care of them, that they feel welcome, and that they think, okay, we are ready to go back to the stores. It's really from small things to big things. How do you work with opening hours? That you can do a lot of things. And then I will get back to the point 6 also later, understanding the next normal, and then what can you do to invest in the future. So can we go to the next, please?
Yes. We have to make, allow me just, Robin, we have to be a little bit more synthetic to move forward, because we're a little...
No problem. So I said that before, there's a lot of good examples, yeah, from Nike, which gave premium access for their virtual classes for free. There's a lot of small communities doing this. Also, INTERSPORT is offering a lot of online classes now. What you see there on the right side, putting that on Instagram and Facebook. So there's a lot of things what you can do, and this will really increase in long term your brand loyalty there. So not more to say to this. Can we go to the next one? And then what is the next normal? Everybody's talking about next normal. For me, next normal is something like a few years ago, the new retail. Everybody talked about new retail. Now everybody's talking about the next normal in the after COVID. So, and there's 6 points there. There's a more price polarization, probably what we expect. This recast as a new home, as a new gym. I mentioned before, online acceleration, definitely still focusing on digital solutions. So what can we do to leverage all the digital solution, from AI to normal multi-channel tools? Shifts in loyalty, I mentioned before. So brands who do now a good job in brand marketing and connect to their consumers will have a long-term effect. So there will definitely be a shift in there. And then retail, and especially offline retail, will be under strong pressure in the future. So this is what we see as really some trends. And when we go to the next one, what can you do to invest in the future? Obviously, there's some things. The good thing is here, and I will not go through all the points below, but I think what is really important, sport will grow and was growing. Also in the future. Yeah? Sport is definitely not that much hit as other industries, maybe entertainment, because people take more care of their health. There will be a good future for sports industry, I'm sure. There will be a shift in where they buy, what brands are successful, but there will definitely be a shift. And there are also chances in there. And I will just point out the last thing, which I heard. We don't do that, but I heard from some industry colleagues, people even do store refurbishments now, as they anyway have to close in some markets. They do earlier. Of course, you have to have the investment power for that, but you have to close your store for 2 months. Then you can do a store refurbishment in this period now. So there are chances to do something now, and then when the stores are back open, you can surprise your customers positively. So there are things what you can do now to invest in the future.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Robin. Sharmin, I guess on your market as well, you've got a few things in terms of how to leverage best the context and the tools precisely.
Yeah. So for me, I think everything that Robin said, it holds true. And because we are more digital as a brand, as a category, for us, it's actually a perfect time to accelerate consumers' acceptance of the digital world. And as I mentioned earlier, apps and APPs, as they call them in China, are so crucial to the evolution of how a consumer gets digitally savvy. For example, now with the COVID situation, you are in your house, but at the same time, the trend for buying gym equipment has increased. The trend for buying fitness in-house materials have increased. Now is the time where you actually can use your app partnerships to provide the analytics that consumers would want to know if they have time to analyze it. They're sitting in their houses. Being in the house actually is more stressful for working executives than being outside, moving and shaking. And a lot of them have been showing withdrawal symptoms. I think it's time to bring the apps in to show how your sleep tracking is, your stress levels. Is it helping you? Is it not helping you? Are you being fit during your work hours? or in your off hours. And I think that working with apps, exploring this horizon is perfect in this time. It gives us a chance to learn. So if you go to the next slide, the way I see it is you have your platforms on the left-hand side of your screen where the product is available. And on the right-hand side, it is how the product is optimized. And that's how we kind of work between these two digital giant opportunities that are represented in the e-tail business and then in the app world. So I think consumers, we have their attention, and now is the time to get them more drawn into this digital world, so that when the time comes to accelerate, we're not spending time prepping them. They're already ripe, and we just have to then go and appeal to them, and may the best brand win when that happens.
I think for what, I mean, you got precisely, your winning recipes, I would say, when it comes to winning the consumers through e-commerce channel. Maybe you can go through this quite rapidly, and maybe quite quickly we could jump into a set of conclusions for precisely,
okay,
what are the key takeaways for tomorrow, and then go to the Q&A, because we could exchange. But precisely go through your few takes in terms of winning recipes, and we can extend during the Q&A.
Okay, so let's jump to the next one. So on this slide, the most important thing to notice is that everybody is marketing from the awareness to the conversion and retention model. This model is not different for any brand, any category, any industry. You create awareness, and then you create consideration, conversion, and then eventually retention. But what is interesting in this slide is look at the opportunities to do this online compared to doing it offline. And now comes a chance where you actually get back to fundamentals, but in a digital way. And it's a perfect occasion where even your offline dealers, as Robin said, the doors are not going to open so fast. Consumers are not going to walk into the physical space so fast. And look at the options available for creating awareness online and the options available for creating conversion online. And this is priceless, because you have been wanting to invest, but you've been kind of splitting your money between online and offline because both channels need to survive. But you don't have that in the next foreseeable 90 days. And now is the time to test it out. If you have A&P funds, I would say give it its best shot, because the one thing that online has which offline doesn't have, it's scientific, analytical, backed data. And data doesn't lie, and it's the time to invest. Let's go to the next slide quickly. Here are some examples of where you can spend and invest: social media, media publishers, search engines, key opinion leaders and influencers, and it's a solid way to invite consumers into your brand, to create the awareness. And then when the time is ready, once they're aware of you and they connect with you, they identify with you, then when the time comes to put money on the table, it will be a far faster conversion journey. To the next slide. In this journey of e-tail and in the COVID period, I don't believe there will be a change in the logic on how e-tail business is done. And in every country, be it China or Japan or Australia or India, campaigns account for a massive portion of the business online. And so, as Robin said, in June, we will have the June 18 in China. And similarly, we have Black Friday, we have Amazon Prime, 11/11, 12/12. These are the times to regain your momentum, to bring your business back on the table. Whatever you lose in the COVID period, if your mechanics, your investment, and your awareness creation homework has already happened during the downtime, I believe that you can still restore some glory back into your business through your key campaign dates. Let's go to the next slide. And here is an example that when you work with platforms, as we are doing very closely, we work with Rakuten, with Amazon, with Lazada, eBay, Tmall, Taobao, and JD.com. the amount of choices which we have to convert business, it's unbelievable. And what we need to do now is, in this era, take our offline dealers, hold their hand and take them with us on the online journey so that everybody can optimize the business over here. And that's what we're doing in SUUNTO. We are actually test marketing a few countries where we are going to bring offline dealers into our fold as business partners and accelerate the online game together. And I think that as the COVID has nudged us in the right direction, but now it's up to us to take the leap and go towards more e-tail and O2O relationships between the trade. I think there's a couple of slides further down. It's a very straightforward tactic. When you're appealing to the consumer, you need to touch them from all angles in all dimensions. It has to be 360. Unidimensional marketing is no longer relevant. So for me, at least, when we come back stronger, we will focus on content. We will focus on key opinion leaders. The app world is here to stay, and we have amazing leverage partnerships with SUUNTO and all the apps in the world which are relevant. And then, of course, as I mentioned, we work with Lazada and the platforms campaign work. So keep your tactics close to you. Supply chain will play a role. Cash flow will play a role, as Robin alluded to. But if you do have a big product launch in the next, let's say, 120 days, now is the time to learn and then deploy on your 120th day to get your sales back in.
Okay, well, thanks very much. I think before we just go to the Q&A, you have, your next shot for tomorrow, Sharmin. What are there's a wrap, and then you've got your idea about, what's next. So go ahead, and then maybe we go back also to Robin live to get his take.
All right, so just to the last slide then, Anina.
Next.
So this is not a prediction. This is more of a hope, because I think that this hope. Let's just click all the way through till you get to all the parts of the slide. Thanks. We're going to have mobile trends. Mobile first will continue. Fitness is going to become crucial because we're so much time spent indoors, and we need to optimize it. So here are my top 5 or 6 points on the next slide, which I think, and I don't want to sound like a predictor, but this is more of hope talking, is first and foremost, people will never underestimate their safety. So from a marketing standpoint, if I appeal to a person's safety, I feel that there is a lot of traction to be gained on this category. It's no longer a convenience to buy online. It has become a necessity. This necessity is going to become a behavioral pattern, and I can guarantee you people don't change behaviors once they get rewarded for it or they start realizing that it's working for them. Geo epicenter targeting is kind of going to fade away because the whole national footprint becomes your playground. And I think that this is going to be massive because the consumer base will increase tenfold during this period. And then comes the most exciting part for me, the productivity at home. People are finally balancing work, fitness, family, and sleep. And I have never seen anybody able to do that successfully. And I think once they start getting used to it, e-tail is here to stay. Working from home might be here to stay. And more personal time might be here once they see the value of it. So online is my new comfort zone, is what I think is going to happen. And we need to be ready to ride that wave when we get to it. So
fantastic. I guess we're all online right now, everything. We feel comfortable. Thanks very much, Sharmin. What about you, Robin? Last take, and then we have questions.
No, please go to the sessions. I think we are short on time. I think go to the questions.
Okay, fantastic. Well, let's go to Lisa Hang, who is asking: Is there a way to avoid huge discounts in order to recover sales? That's a question I guess both of you can speak. Robin, you're first.
I think it will be difficult. Of course, a brand can have influence on it, but there's a lot of products now in the market which need to be sold. Some retailers will handle it more, let's say careful. But if you have a cash flow problem, you have to get the products out. So there will definitely a price fight. Hopefully not with too much. I don't see that so much in China yet, even though some brands start to give high discounts. Hopefully they will use really these 618, 818, double 11 in China, and also others that consumers don't learn, okay, now it's really discount. You cannot really avoid that, but I think you have to be careful, especially with new products, and what do you really put on high discounts.
Sharmin, you want to follow up with this?
Well, actually, the reality is, guys, that discounting is not the right word anymore in this game. It is product life cycle management. So if you are going to play on an online and an offline environment, you must learn your PLC. If you can do your PLC smartly, then you walk away with enough revenue generation without compromising your new businesses, your new products. And so I hate this, when the offline dealer comes and tells you, oh my God, you're discounting so much and it's become a nightmare. That's not the truth anymore. We are able to work smartly, and platforms themselves don't like to call it discount. It is just product lifecycle management. So if you want more information, you can always catch up with us offline, and happy to share.
But it's really different in what product group you are. If you have seasonal products, wearables, I don't say you are in a good situation, but it's a different situation than when you have 1 million pairs of summer shorts in your stock. And you have to get rid, or you keep it for a year, but then the color is not right anymore. Yeah, so there is a difference in different industries, of course. So yeah, it might be different in different sectors, different countries, different channels, yes, but there will be an impact, of course.
Okay, we have 2 more questions, and then we will end the session. What will be the best tactic for cross-border e-commerce right now in order to get through the COVID situation? That's a big question, yeah, indeed.
Can you repeat the question, Laura?
What would be the best tactic for cross-border e-commerce right now, actually facing this situation for cross-border?
That is something very interesting question. Could you use, if you are active in several countries, could you use cross-border e-commerce to bring products from one country to the other now? Mm-hmm. It's not always that easy, of course. It is definitely a way, but is there somewhere in the world a shortage of products now? I don't really see that at the moment. There will be some products where it might make sense now to bring to China because China is recovering, and then afterwards bringing them somewhere else. But it also very much depends on the industry and on the brand if you can do that or not. So I don't see that this is really the solution for the industry of doing cross-border, because this is a very complex thing with importing, exporting, custom clearance. So not every country has the same, like the Tmall Global, Suning Global proposition and logistics system as China has. So cross-border e-commerce into China is definitely a thing now, but it's not the solution of the global stock problem, the global sales problem. I don't see that.
Okay. And there's a last question. Your first input strategy for Italian brand for sportive automotive clothing, SEO or social in Chinese market? What is your first input strategy? I mean, it's Emanuele, based in Italy. SEO or social in Chinese market?
Sorry, can you repeat that again?
The question of Emanuele is, what would be your input for a strategy for an Italian brand, actually in the sportive automotive clothing, to use SEO and or social in Chinese market?
really different in when you are an Italian brand versus if you are a French brand, a German brand, an American brand. I don't really see that. I mean, I'm working with a lot of Italian brands, for example, Technica, together, or Mico, or whatever, some winter sports, some outdoor brands. Is it really better for them than others? Is it worse? I don't see that. Of course, Italy is hit very hard, so they need to generate maybe more income from outside of Italy because the Italian economy will be hit hard. But will Chinese consumers, or also in other countries, see, okay, now we have to support this country more than others, maybe even? I don't see. You still have to play this the digital marketing quite well in order to do that, but of course not saying please buy our products because we are an Italian brand, we were hit so hard. This is of course not the right strategy. Can there be some leveraging? I think yes, of the country of origin, but yeah, I would not play that too much, I would say.
Well, thanks very much. I think we were over. I just want to thank both of you, Sharmin, Robin. I know you're super, super busy. I think we were very lucky to have you for such a long amount of time. Thanks again for your time, for your latest input, insights into your understanding and of the situation and coping with it. We look forward actually to know more about how the markets recover. Just want to say to all the people who are still actually following us that the replay is going to be available starting this afternoon, this late evening for you in Asia. Just want to say, Anina, next slide please, that we're happy to see you next week. It's going to be our third program on Wednesday the 22nd, still same time, 11 a.m., 5 p.m. China time, with a topic that we called From Infection to Inflection, Navigating the New Normal. So it's going to be about media touch points, it's going to be about consumer sentiment, how much, and what brands need to do to actually, yes, indeed, leverage the situation. And we'll have also the testimony of Jaguar Land Rover, who is joining us. We will make that announcement later today as well. So you can share it with your networks, obviously. So joining Dentsu, CNN, who is a partner of our weekly online series, and Jaguar Land Rover next week. Thanks very much. Next slide as well. If you want to follow us on WeChat, if you want to also get in touch with me, you can scan those QR codes. I guess that's it for the day. We had 1 hour and 10 minutes. Fantastic. I think we beat the record, but we have time, and that was a fantastic opportunity. So again, thank you very much, Sharmin, Robin, Alina. Thank you all for following us.
Guys.
And we hope to see you next week as well. Thank you.
Lovely to see you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.